Marshall will take control.
Thank you, Maria, and welcome back to the feature here. 9 wins and 10 wins here for our two players here, kind of middle of the pack for them as we see the wins mount up tournament after tournament. There's going to be 7 of these weekends. We're only in the second one still, so still quite a long way to go. But we have Burchett versus Javier Dominguez. Javier, well, he loves this archetype, right? I mean, this thing won him a Mythic Championship.
I mean, yeah, let's go smash.
Right.
But that was a really important draw. Without that land, Javier would have been in a lot of trouble. Because there's actually quite a few tap lands in the Gruul deck between Kizandu Valley, Fabled Passage. So there weren't a lot of draws there, so that's nice to have that nice and secure, so you get to stomp if Skyclave Apparition comes down, or just deal the damage and then have a 4-free body next turn.
Autumn on the other side of the battlefield has brought what we've seen some players bring that looks like a response to the Gruul deck. As we know, Autumn, being a huge fan of Gruul themselves, would probably prefer to play it if they thought it was the best deck, but apparently beating the best deck was the top line order here for Autumn Burchett.
Right. It is generally better to beat the best deck if you can make sure your other matchups aren't in a bad spot. And yeah, Elspeth's Nightmare are going to be really effective at not just dealing with this Innkeeper, but also the Embercleave and denying the card from Bonecrusher Giant. So it's essentially acting as a 3-for-1, pretty much.
Wow. Here comes that Elspeth's Nightmare. Javier can try to move his cards around to throw Autumn off, but that's not how it works, of course.
No, that's not how it works, right? The hand is static even if you shuffle your own cards.
No, they should change that. They should change it, right? You have to try to get a little, keep up with your opponent in there. As it stands, so Embercleave's going to hit the bin. And Autumn has Cling to Dust as well to grab a card. And it's a Skyclave Apparition.
Yeah. That deals nicely with the Bonecrusher Giant. Sets up Yorion, so Javier can answer the Skyclave Apparition, but then that doesn't really matter. And if the Skyclave Apparition isn't answered, then you get to get the next thread on the docket.
And there's a Skyclave Apparition for the Bonecrusher Giant. Javier doesn't look too pleased with this situation.
Right. Being on the draw and your opponent being able to answer your threats is not generally an enjoyable position to be in.
Right. The control deck just answering everything that you've put on the battlefield thus far feels bad.
Yeah. I think the other problem is these Esper Doom Foretold decks can't close out the game pretty quickly. Emeria's Call plus Yorion Sky Nomad is 12 a turn in the air. You don't need much of that to take over a game.
Looks like Javier discarded a Bonecrusher Giant there to the Fire Prophecy. Did I see that right?
Yes, that seems correct. It just wasn't going to be very relevant. I think at this point, Javier is looking for high impact cards, mana to make sure that this essentially Ox of Agonas can come down and reload. So ideally, Javier would actually draw a card like Brushfire Elemental again. So a second copy of Brushfire Elemental would be, I think, the best draw in the deck, because at that point you get to play both with Fabled Passage and crack in for a ton of damage.
All right, let's see if Javier can find that. Although now we see Yori and Sky Nomad hit the battlefield, generate a little bit of advantage thanks to the Omen of the Sea, but the 4/5 blocker is what's important here.
To be fair, even any kind of 2-drop or 3-drop is probably what Javier wants here. An Embercleave would be okay.
How about a 1-drop and a 3-drop?
Probably choose one of the two.
All right, well, here comes Brushfire Elemental, and with the aid of the Fabled Passage there, that is going to allow it to attack into Yorion and force through 5 points of damage or a uncomfortable chump block for Autumn.
This gets fascinating now because Javier...
we do see the chump here.
Yeah, but that's a pretty big telegraph.
So what would you be thinking if you were in Javier's seat at this point? Sweeper incoming?
Probably no spot removal, since
Mm.
in a spot like that, if you had Elspeth's Nightmare or spot removal spell, you might just pass and let them try to do it because you're at 17 life. So you figure probably not a lot of spot removal. Most likely, I would put my opponent here on having Extinction Event or Shatter the Sky, because the board is threatening enough, and that certainly indicates that kind of position.
And that is actually the case here. Autumn has Shatter the Sky in hand, and they can deploy it.
Obviously, I'm going to look good because I look at we can see Autumn's hand. Right now, the position that's a little difficult is you only get to play one spell this turn, and you kind of want the Shatter the Sky to be at the very end. Autumn, I believe, maybe concerned about the last card in hand and wants to make sure that you can get rid of everything, essentially.
Nice draw there from Javier. Look at that. That Brushfire Elemental unlocks 6 points of damage that Javier was not going to have access to without it.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty... You know about the Ox now as well, so you know that if you Shatter the Sky, there's a reload button. But that said, at least the card that's drawn off Ox is less likely to be problematic.
And there's Treacherous Blessing as well. So even with that big hit of damage hitting Autumn last turn, they're able to quite cleanly deal with the board here. And now it's up to Javier to rebuild once again. Scavenging Ooze, and it looks like a Lovestruck Beast are the follow-up plays.
Yeah.
A little bit of an awkward beast here.
Right, but Javier's taking that risk, right? You have the Ox of Agona, so there's a chance to draw an Edgewell Innkeeper and an untapped green source, then you can attack for 5. And I think just needs to do that kind of higher risk tempo play, because if you make a 1/1, that's not really putting on kind of any pressure. So just has to take the risk, put the 500 in play, trust that the Ox will get the cards that are necessary.
Yeah, this does present a lethal attack most likely. Now, the Javier's Graveyard did just get exiled to the 3rd chapter. Ooh, and there's Doom Foretold. So that's going to take out one of these cards.
Yeah, this is actually what Autumn wants to set up, right? Is set up a position where you Shatter the Sky, draw cards, and then get to a point where you can have Doom Foretold on a board with either 1 or 2 permanents maximum. Ideally 1, right? Because then it prevents any future permanents probably for a turn. I mean, if Javier draws a 1/1, this would be over, but I think if Autumn gets to untap, it's going to be over the other way pretty much. Actually, yeah, sorry. With the Doom Foretold getting sacrificed, that's probably not going to be the case, and...
Right.
My bad. But it is getting close. Treacherous Blessing would be a problem if it wasn't for that Doom Foretold as well.
All right, here comes the Ox, though. Making sure that an Edgewell Innkeeper hit would actually enable an attack, and it's triple lands off the top. Not even spell lands either, just Fabled Passage ×2 and a Forest. And you can see that Javier knew he was already cutting it close, and bricking there is devastating.
Right, that was the turn, right? Is you play Ox, you hope for the best, and that was certainly the reverse, the opposite of the best.
Right, and you can see by the look on Javier's face that he understands that that was really his one time to try to close out the game. You know, there were sequences of cards when you're drawing 3 that could get it done. You find an Edgewell Innkeeper, you bash for 5, and now Stomp's live. You know, a bunch of different cards could get the job done from that point. But now it's going to slowly start slipping away again because the Doom Foretold is still on the battlefield. So one of these creatures is going to be gone. You would assume the Beast, but you know, now you've only got 4 power and things are going to start slipping.
Right. And Autumn also gets to either play the second Doom Foretold or Euron. I do like playing the second Doom Foretold, which is Autumn's line here, because it makes sure that there's
going to wipe the board.
Right, and it doesn't leave you cold to like an Embercleave. Autumn has no way of knowing these are freelance, right? So you're trying to play your best around. Right, because these are freelance, kind of any decision would seem correct, but having the second Doom Foretold, I think, given impartial information, was the right line.
And there we go. Double Doom Foretold. And my goodness sakes, another land off the top of the library here for Dominguez, who's seen enough, is going to pack it in for game number one. Big sigh of relief for Autumn Burchett as they take down the first game, and we move into sideboards. We'll let the the players sideboard for a second. While we do, we'll take a short break. We'll see in just a minute. And welcome back. We've got Javier Dominguez versus Autumn Burchett here in round 10. We're in day number 2. We're watching the MPLers go at it. We're happy that you decided to join us on one of our MTG League weekends. These are really fun. They play round robin style, so each player plays each other player in the league. Takes away a certain uncertainty. Right? There's always the chance when you build your deck and you go to a tournament that you will not receive the matchups that you had hoped. Perhaps half of the field is one specific deck and you built your deck to beat it, and then you just don't play against it. That happens sometimes, right? You only play it once in the whole first day, something like that. And, or, sometimes you just get matched up against the really great players because it can be random like that. And all of a sudden you're just facing down these insanely good players round after round. And you think, oh gosh, if I would have played like a normal human being at some point here, perhaps I could have a better record. Well, here, all of that's gone. You are going to play every other player and every other deck. So it really puts your metagaming to the test, and you don't get that excuse of, well, I played against the better players. Well, you know what? They're all the good players here. So that's the world that you live in. And I love it. I think that there's something really cool to this, that by the end of these 7 weekends, we're going to get a chance to really see who performed the best. And there's a decent sample size, and it's thorough in the sense that there was no randomness to the matchups. And we're going to kind of get an answer out of it where, a lot of times it can be tempting to think that the player who did best at a tournament was the best player in that tournament, but that isn't always the case.
No, and we're going to see a lot of matches. Focusing specifically on this one, Autumn's hand with that 2-mana removal spell plus Elspeth Nightmare is such a powerful 1-2 punch on the draw. I mean, it's fine on the play, right? But the fact that you're on the draw, get to stop their free drop, and if there was any 1-drop or 2-drop, you get to Elspeth Nightmares it. Plus, you have Vivian.
Nasty.
Yeah, and Vivian Monsters Advocate, normally a card you would think is good in matchups like this, right? You get to do long-term card advantage. It's a different type of permanent. It's not affected by a card like Eliminate or Glass Casket. Problem is, look at what Javier has to do.
Jeez. I know that if you're just sort of half watching, you might think that that's a good thing for Javier, because he got rid of the Elspeth's Nightmare. That was a disaster. He has no board state, and he had to use one of his creatures in his entire turn 4 to take away a card that had already done some work. Feels bad. This has not gone well. Boy, you can see why Autumn chose this list. These sequences against Gruul are just brutal.
Right, but here's the thing. Autumn knows what's up. The thing is, when Javier does this, it's not for the Great Henge and it's not for Embercleave, because either of those cards just need more board presence. So there's not much point to trying to protect it. So Autumn knows it's Vivian, and that's the land off the top to slam Vivian, a card that Autumn doesn't have an answer to. Autumn knows about this. So that's why I think you see the Yorion also come into hand. There's no need to keep up Eliminate. You just want to give yourself the best chance to just land the 5-drop that can attack Vivian.
Now, when you say Autumn knows about this, you don't mean that Autumn actually knows. This is a read that Autumn put based on the information, right?
Yeah. I think based on Autumn's expressions, cards in hand, and reactions, plus the line of play.
I'm saying Autumn doesn't actually know about Vivian in hand, right?
Right.
Right. So that is a great read from Autumn Burchett, who said, given all the information that I have, right? This is the only plausible explanation. And even said, I'm just going to use my 3 mana to put Yorion in hand because I'm confident that I know exactly what's about to happen here. And having no answer for it, I'm going to try to set up for the future. Really impressive stuff from Autumn.
Yeah, no, for sure. And also not pretty good draw, to be honest. There.
Wow, Doom Foretold helps too.
I mean, yeah, it's exactly on time. Handles the Vivian. I mean, obviously it won't stick around since there's no instant speed way there's no Omen of the Sea here to be flashed in. So, I mean, that was really key because now Javier has a board, but this is where the power of playing something like Shadow of the Sky comes in. Is normally in these spots, if you look at something like Sivka's list, which I think was also a good choice for this tournament, but it has more spot removal, whereas Shadow of the Sky can deal with this whole board in one swoop for a single card, and then you can come back into tempo with cards like Glass Casket, Eliminate, and Skyclave Apparition.
Ooh, that Doom Foretold was nice for Autumn. They were like, okay, I'm going to have to play this longer game. I'm going to set up for a Yorion. I'm going to try to pressure this Planeswalker at some point. Maybe I can remove a blocker and then start instead it's like, Doom Foretold, get you. Works a lot easier that way.
Yeah. While Autumn's deliberating a play, by the way, this is really a decision of, do I shatter now for tempo, or do I try to play a single removal spell, try to get more out of this Shadow of the Sky? Or maybe set up an Elspeth Nightmare, right? You could go Elspeth Nightmare, Brushfire Elemental, play something like a Glass Casket on the token, because that sets up a really nice Yorion next turn. If you see the Shatter, it's kind of an admission of, because Autumn's ahead, it would be an admission of, look, I just don't want to take the risk, and this is the safest line I can take, even though it isn't necessarily the most card efficient.
The most high upside. Okay, so there we go. Shatter the Sky to leave Javier once again with no board state, though he does get a card. Though in this case, it was a mountain, leaving him with just Kazandu Mammoth, a Bone Crusher Giant, and that mountain in hand. Not a lot to work with, especially given that all of these cards are sorcery speed. These are no haste happening here. And it's going to make it difficult because Autumn, generally speaking, has the ability to deal with threats once they're on the board. As we've seen, the sweepers and the spot removal spells have done a very good job. And that's exactly what we're going to see here from Burchett.
Yeah, this turn is going to involve some combination of cards that deal with both these permanents.
Right. And you can, and the thing is, we were talking about the read that Autumn had. Well, Javier is kind of in that mental state now, I think, where having had effectively every card that he's played for the entire match get answered, he's probably expecting that to happen again here as well.
Yeah. This match is going to start winding down because Autumn is going to, Autumn played well to get to this state, got the Doom Foretold on time, and now probably going to dominate. One thing I want to note on Javier's mental state is, because I was noticing him talking on Twitter and appearing quite down. Mm-hmm. And I mean, we can see Javier being quite down, which I normally wouldn't point out, but like, it's very apparent here. And it's alluding to the fact that these are rough, right? Like at free 5, you could drop from a normal tournament, but in this one, you gotta stay on board until you and play more and more matches, even if the day is not going your way.
Super rough. And it doesn't get better. Sometimes when you play games like Magic, it can really feel like when it rains, it pours. I mean, you see Javier play both creatures, pass the turn, see both of them get killed, then immediately just draws a land. Now, here's some hope, though. There's Ox of Agonis now for the reload.
Right, that was probably the best card that Javier could draw, because it's not just one, right? It's multiple cards.
Right, exactly. So this is a 4/2 on the board and 3 spells into hand. It's Wilt, Innkeeper, Innkeeper. Does this leave any wiggle room here to get out of this mess? The Wilt, no target for that at the moment. And it looks like Javier's going to keep the Innkeepers in hand as well. Doesn't want to expose them.
Yeah, because if by playing the Innkeepers now, you give Autumn pretty much a free pass, right? Elspeth Nightmare goes live. Glass Casket would also work. Skyclave Apparition. So any of those sorcery speed answers would all of a sudden be activated. So heads up from Javier to just keep them in hand. Of course, while it is a reload from Javier, Autumn is going to start being able to put on pressure, and there are a lot of spot answer removal spells. So kind of Ox was one of the best draws, but Javier still needs another reload option.
That's right. And this could be just an adventure creature, right? With 8 mana available for Dominguez, we could see something like a Bone Crusher Giant or a Lovestruck Beast come off the top and really give a lot of cards to Dominguez. And you can see that the Wilt actually comes in handy as well. I was kind of expecting him to cycle it, but he actually found a target with the Glass Casket now. I think that Autumn was hoping to just get all creatures off the board to reduce the chance of getting Ember Cleaved. As we saw the trade happen there with the Skyclave Apparition, and then there was going to be the follow-up Glass Casket, but that isn't actually how it panned out this time.
Right. That Glass Casket was pretty important because it would have removed a token and then been around for Yorion.
Of course.
Yeah, Autumn is very worried about the Great Henge at this point. You mentioned Evercleave, which is true, so you could wait, but you want to get rid of this free because it would allow the Great Henge to hit play. All
right, now we're going to see another Ox off the top here. Perhaps a glimmer of hope. We see both of the Innkeepers hit the battlefield, and now Ox of Agonis number 2 is going to hit the board, and that's going to be another reload. Whoa, double Embercleave. And if this Ox can stick around, perhaps it could pick up a sword and get to rumbling.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, that second Ox was key. That was essentially Javier's ticket back into the game. Autumn was really looking for something to lock up the game. Treacherous Blessing would have really done a good job because with that extra Yorion, Treacherous Blessing allows you to draw the extra cards you need to deal with the board, plus the reload with Yorion and a healthy 14 life. But Autumn hasn't drawn the Doom Foretold was very timely, but apart from that Doom Foretold, Autumn hasn't drawn particularly amazingly here. And Javier getting to go Ox into Ox means that now you have this position where Autumn is out of answers against Embercleave, but really came down to those reload options, the reload of Ox of Agonis, and against the lack of reload or something.
Brushfire Elemental off the top. I think that's lethal.
Yeah, it was pretty close to lethal just before too with that Embercleave.
Yeah, it was at 11 with Autumn at 14, but now an extra 3 is going to do it. Yeah, boy, what a change of events here. Javier Dominguez looked down and out, both on the webcam, but also from a game perspective, and now is just taking this game back right here and right now, going to force a Game 3 decider between Autumn Burchett and Javier Dominguez. Ooh.
Yeah.
Ooh. That was some nice stuff. Back-to-back Oxen there got the job done for Javier, Eduardo.
Right, and you can see why a lot of the Gruul players kind of put Ox as the flex slot, right? In these post-board games, against Rogues, it's obviously a stellar card. But in a lot of these post-board games, you end up in these scenarios where you're trading 1-for-1, and your opponents are trying their hardest to stop Embercleave, to stop the Great Henge, while Ox of Agonis is a lot harder to stop. And the fact is, if you're trading 1-for-1, you maybe get to escape it just once. That's a lot of cards that can come in. And if your opponent doesn't have a way to lock up the game or generate card advantage beyond what Ox of Agonis can do, that's you see it. You saw it in that game. Autumn was quite far ahead, but just didn't draw into a Omen of the Sea or a Treacherous Blessing. And I think either of those cards would have allowed Autumn to win. But in the lack of those, Javier going Ox of Agonis twice allowed Javier to essentially take the lead.
All right, well, the players are back to sideboarding. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we'll have the Game 3 decider. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back as we head into game number 3 between Javier Dominguez and Autumn Burchett. Boy, that one looked really good for Autumn and really bad for Javier until a pair of Ox of Agonis got Javier right back in it, and he was able to steal that game. Now let's see who's going to take down game 3 and the match.
Yeah. This game already a pretty difficult decision for Javier in terms of sequencing. Just which land do you start with? What are you trying to prioritize? I'd say Autumn still feels ahead just because of how good these answers seem to line up with Javier's hand. Now, the fourth flight actually opens up interesting avenues. So the thing with Edgewall Innkeeper is that essentially sometimes you just want to wait until turn 4 where you can land it plus play an adventure creature, but that puts very little pressure. So you have to wait a while, and you can tell Javier just doesn't want to run into Elspeth's Nightmare, trying to protect that Embercleave in hand, but foregoing the damage of Brushfire Elemental.
Omen of the Sea hits the battlefield here for Burchett.
Correctly doing it on their own turn because there's no instant speed anyways. So it makes sense to do it on your on their own turn because then you get to scry right in that scenario where unless both cards were kept on top, as long as you bottom one, this is a much you get much more utility from your Temple of Deceit. I think the sequence Javier is aiming for might be something like Brushfire Elemental, Edgewall Innkeeper, and then next turn play the second Edgewall Innkeeper and Bonecrusher Giant.
Wow, that's a nice sequence if that goes off for Javier. Reload the hand and keep pressure on the board.
Right.
Autumn takes a hit here, and there's a pretty juicy board of 2 creatures that are scary, right? But for 2 different reasons. Let's see what happens now from Autumn's perspective.
It's definitely tempting to fire off this Elspeth's Nightmare because this would be before the Great Henge or Embercleave could come down, or a turn before Vivian Monster's Advocate could. So this is definitely the turn you want to fire off Elspeth's Nightmare. As you say, though, which one? It depends. With the amount of cards in Autumn's hand, it's not even that close in terms of card advantage. So you could go after the Brushfire Elemental if you feeling that comfortable on just cards and rather focus on preventing damage.
And that is the case, though perhaps some punishment here. The Edgewall Innkeeper is going to come down. That's also going to get in for 1. And then Bonecrusher Giant means 2 cards back into hand here for Javier Dominguez. And the pressure is on Autumn now from the card advantage perspective for sure.
Yeah, so take Vivian because you can deal with this board thanks to Extinction Event. All the creatures are odd.
So a perfectly clean answer here and a very nice turn for Burchett. Also showing off the power of Elspeth's Nightmare here, both just from a raw card perspective, but also, that didn't cost any mana, right? You get a duress that you didn't have to pay anything for, and it lets you, this turn, I should say, and that lets you also use up your mana here to fire off the sweeper.
Right. It's a card that's seen more play as the Gruul decks have focused more on these kind of top end cards like, Embercleave, Great Henge, Vivian Monster's Advocate. And it's also fantastic against rogues, by the way.
Right. That third chapter, blowing away the graveyard from your opponent, can be really relevant. It even can be relevant in this matchup with the Ox of Agonis coming in for Javier Dominguez.
Right. Scavenging News as well, sometimes. This is Marshall. You're a fan of value, right?
Oh, big fan, yeah.
Right. Well, I think you're gonna like this turn from Autumn. You're gonna really like this turn.
I'm loving this turn from Autumn. Oh my goodness sakes! This is just the dream. Do it. Come on. Triple Omen of the Sea getting blanked by Yorion. Oh, that is just dreamy.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard for Javier. I mean, Javier's looked behind in all 3 games, but this might be the most behind Javier's looked in the game.
Yeah. Yeah, especially looking at the hand, right? You see the Embercleave that Autumn knows about, but otherwise it's just a lowly Edgewall Innkeeper holding down the fort here.
Yeah. But, you know, while we wait for infinite card advantage to resolve, I do want to highlight this build of the Esper Doom Foretold deck that we saw Matt Sperling, Emma Handy pull to good records in the Rivals League, and Autumn piloting, as we see an Embercleave get flashed in.
Oh, you don't see that very often, but hey.
Hey, got to be mana efficient, got to play to your outs. Javier was correct in identifying that the only way to possibly win is to draw an Ox, so you got to play as if you're going to draw it. But yeah, as I was saying, yeah, this build of Doom Foretold, very, very, I think, very good this weekend. Great choice, great pickup, good build. Exactly what you need against the Gruul decks, and we see it take care of Gruul time and time again. So, you know, the games didn't look necessarily that close, but a lot of that just came down to the deck building. A lot of times matches of Magic come down to things that happen before your competition even starts, and deck building is very important in making sure you give yourself the best chance to do well. I'm not sure if Autumn specifically had a great record though this week, but I know that Emma Handy and Matt Sperling did. So
So what happens now? Autumn just gets to decide from all these great options. Starting things off with Elspeth's Nightmare.
It's worth pointing out that without Elspeth Conquers Death, a 5-mana permanent is actually not that easy for the Doom Foretold decks to handle. The Heartless Axe actually going to be pretty nice against this Ox of Agona, since if Javier commits the whole turn to equipping the Ox with Embercleave, then Autumn can just respond with the Heartless Act. The problem with Heartless Act, though, is that that's essentially your whole turn. You don't get to do anything else, right? Like, because there's only 4 mana available. Elspeth's Nightmare was such high upside with the Ox being played and making sure that it can't escape down the line.
Yeah, the Heartless Act is going to stay in hand for the moment.
Yeah. And Autumn was hesitating a lot there because, again, of the Great Hench. Normally, you'd want to wait on Heartless Act, of course, if it's anything to do with board position. But giving your opponent the Great Hench for less mana is relatively dangerous.
Oh, sure.
Although I think Autumn's going to be happy not to see the Great Hench and seeing this equip up with Embercleave.
Yeah, relatively expensive here. There is a land to complement the Brushfire Elemental that just got added to the board. But of course, Heartless Act will be able to clean up a good chunk of this mess here.
Yeah.
Once again, you see the Brushfire Elemental able to attack cleanly here. Only Yorion can block it, and with the Fable Passage on board, it threatens to be a 5/5.
Yeah, I like this block from Autumn, or at least the consideration of it, since there is a chance you just want to prevent damage, right? You have Treacherous Blessing, you have Dream Trawler. You're going to get all the cards you want, so you just need time to deploy them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's see, with access, if Autumn can draw an untapped land, you get the option to go Dream Trawler plus Glass Casket on this Brushfire Elemental.
Oof.
And that might be really rough for Javier.
Yeah, that could be it. That type of turn sequence can be so difficult to come back from, especially with all the resources available to Autumn. They've set themselves up beautifully. You can see the Treacherous Blessing ready and waiting there to reload the hand as well in case this last flurry of value isn't enough to get the job done. And we see that exact sequence that you described here, Eduardo. Dream Trawler on the battlefield facing down a whole lot of nothing.
Yeah. I think Autumn at this point is just, you know, Autumn's ahead. So taking the time to just consider, look, how do I lose this game? Because I'm ahead. I have Dream Trawler. I have Treacherous Blessing to reload.
Ooh. Is Brushfire good? I suppose with just the one land, it can't be completely devastating, but it's Probably had to be one of the better draws here, right?
I mean, that speaks volumes to the value of the haste creatures, right? And
It really
why I think
does.
some of the builds of Gruul might actually be rougher for these Esper Doom Foretold decks, specifically the ones with Questing Beast, because you get access to more haste creatures with evasion. Because Brushfire Elemental and Questing Beast both can't be blocked by something like Skyclave Apparition, a card that has seen a ton of play in all these lists.
All right. And here comes an Ox. What is that going to add to the board? Wilt in hand, as well as a Thrashy Bee and a Lovestruck Beast.
Well, Wilt is essentially a Brushfire Elemental at this point. So the problem is obviously Javier's out of lands, and that graveyard's going away. So we're not going to see much of a reload for a while. It's interesting to me that Javier decided to essentially play the Ox rather than equip the Brushfire Elemental with Embercleave. And it tells you maybe a different approach, right? Autumn took great lengths to avoid damage, which means that Javier is less incentivized to go down the damage route because Autumn's life total is higher. So that means that Autumn is going, that Javier is now going to prioritize trying to get card advantage as a result of that.
Trying to steal a win here is Javier Dominguez, Autumn Burchett, going through the scenarios, trying to figure out what is the best way to approach this. But one critical thing that happened is Autumn got to untap with the Dream Trawler, and usually that's the death knell for any opponent who's trying to attack. Now, Embercleave may have something to say about that, but still, these Dream Trawler hits are rough.
Kind of fascinating not to see the Treacherous Blessing pre-combat, which to me, I think means that Autumn is focusing on Yorion. You know, play the companion cost and play Yorion this turn. Otherwise, we would have probably seen Treacherous Blessing pre-combat, obviously, because it would have been
for
plus 3 damage.
3. Yeah, for sure.
Treacherous
Blessing, the pump spell.
This is lethal next turn. If you play Yorion Sky Nomad this turn, actually the Yorion would also have been plus 3 damage. So I'm wondering about... I know you want options, but if you're going to Yorion, I guess it would make sense to Yorion pre-combat. But the reason you don't see it is because it doesn't fundamentally matter. You have 2 Treacherous Blessings in hand, so you could just play both and attack for 11 in the air next turn with just that Dream Trawler, and there's not much that Javier can do to prevent this.
Javier looks, again, like he's a little frustrated.
Yeah, because the Brushfire Elementals were really nice in that they could essentially go unblocked. But
yeah, you know, it looks like, I mean, I assume that Autumn's play here is trying to keep maximum blocker toughness up, right?
Right. This Dream Trawler will end the game, so just next turn. So this turn is just survival. Also, this untapped the Dream Trawler, which is really...
Well, that's what I meant. That's what I meant by maximum blocking toughness, is that you can get 3 extra life by playing the Yorion and drawing the 3 cards, but then you don't get the blocker.
Right. Right, because even if everything goes extremely bad, and somehow Javier is able to mount over 17 damage across this Yorion, you still do have the Dream Trawler.
And it looks like the Skyclave Apparition is going to take a hike here as well.
Yeah, because that means the Glass Casket can take the free, or both Brushfire Elementals can go away.
Yeah, also, of course, the Yorion coming in itself, you know, doesn't trigger those omens until the end step. So that you don't get the cards off of that and wouldn't affect the Trawler's power. Now, if you wanted to fire off Treacherous Blessing, it would. So this looks about perfect here for Autumn Burchett, maximizing damage while also maximizing toughness on blocks here, just because there is an Embercleave sitting on the battlefield. And basically, Autumn understands that they just need to survive this one more turn.
Right. And while astute viewers might notice the clock, it's not really going to matter. Autumn's going to be able to probably just play both Treacherous Blessings next turn to attack for 11 in the air.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Javier has to win the game this turn, and it doesn't seem like there's a way to do so.
Yeah. Javier seems to agree with your assessment based on
that. Boy, he is not enjoying this match, not at all. Did manage to pick up game number 2, but in the meantime, well, you can see Autumn brought the tools for this matchup. Understanding the metagame and having brought a deck that seems to be pretty good against Gruul here.
Yeah. The most impressive part is Autumn still has all these options left in hand.
Right. Look at that hand. 6 spells.
I was listening to Andrea's interview, and he was and he mentioned pretty strongly that the reason to play Esper Doom Foretold is essentially Omen of the Sea. This is mostly black-white control, but that splashes for Omen of the Sea, or obviously in this case Dream Trawler. But think about it that way, right? Like this Yorion bouncing those Omen of the Seas is a key reason why Autumn is winning. It's 1 by 1, 1 by 1. And then at some point you play a 4/5 that essentially locks up the game because you can get into all the cards you need to that you possibly ever need to lock up the game.
Autumn's going over every possible iteration of cards here to see, is there any way that I could die here? And the answer is no, at least not as from what we see. So here comes the blocks. And Autumn's going to drop down to just 15 life from 17, so only taking 2. And Javier really just doesn't have much that he can do at this point rather than just dump his hand on the battlefield.
Yeah, but Javier doesn't know about these 2 Treacherous Blessings, but they are going to lock up the game. So it's going to be +6 damage on the Dream Trawler, getting it to 10, and the attack will be 11.
That's right. It's perfect amount. The exact finish. Look at this flurry of action from Autumn. Burchett plays Treacherous Blessing 7, plays another one, and that is going to do it. Javier Dominguez scoops him up, and Autumn Burchett picks up the win here in round number 10 with this Esper list. Well done, Autumn. Victory in the books there for Autumn Burchett. It looked pretty good, too. I have to say that deck would be the choice that I would pick after having at least just watched this one match of the matchup. We actually had a chance, or Maria actually had a chance to chat with Autumn, and we'll hear from that right now.
Hey everybody, I'm here with Autumn Burchett. Congratulations on your win over Javier Dominguez there. You're now at 10 wins across these 2 league weekends so far, playing Esper Doom Foretold this weekend. Can you talk a little bit about your choice of this deck specifically for this weekend? Because it seems to match up pretty dang good against Gruul.
Yeah, so the team, I'm working with a team of Rivals members, Matt Sperling, Emma Handy, Jess Estefan, and Ali Warfield. And
awesome team.
Really good team. And we were really high on Gruul. Kind of like Sunday evening, we were just like, all of us were just, we can't really figure out any reason to not register Gruul instead of anything else. And then we looked at like match win percentages and stuff, and Esper seemed to be doing okay against Gruul, even though we figured, okay, these Esper lists vary a lot. Maybe some of them aren't going to be tuned as well as others. Maybe we can put some work in and see where we can end up with the deck. And we put in a lot of work just to like tune it against Gruul, make us like pretty good in that matchup. And I think the matchups ended up okay for us. I definitely feel ahead, though it's not by like a large amount. And I just decided, okay, I feel like no one is going to come to this tournament if they don't think they're at least 50% against Gruul with their deck.
Yeah.
It's just like not a thing that's going to happen. And I think this deck is legitimately pretty decent against Gruul. So I'm just going to take this risk, and the rest of the team was on the same page too.
Well, it seems to be paying off so far with people playing Esper Doom Foretold this weekend. Is this kind of your style of deck, or is this outside of your comfort zone?
Honestly, I'm happy playing pretty much whatever as long as it's powerful and feels good. Like obviously I played Gruul in the grand finals, and last week I played Team Ramp, just like 3 completely different decks. I'm kind of happy to just play whatever. Magic's fun.
That's like awesome to be able to say, you know what? Hey, is this the best deck? I'm just going to grab it and play it for this weekend. But yeah, you mentioned the season grand finals there. You made top 8 playing the breakout deck of the tournament, which was Gruul there. After that whole tournament was said and done, how were you feeling basically about your position in the MPL, knowing all of these league weekends are ahead of you and everything?
It's tough. Like obviously most of the players in the MPL are quite a bit more experienced than me. I'm definitely one of like the newer players in the batch, and the cutoff to stay in the MPL is pretty harsh. So I definitely don't have my like sights locked on staying in. I'm just gonna try my best and see what happens.
Well, you might be one of the, newer players or whatever, how you want to say it, but you've certainly got tons of great fans and lots of fan support out there. I see it all the time on social media. It's got to feel nice to have that boost too.
It does. The fans I have rallying behind me, it's really exciting. Obviously, I have like an amazing community that shows up to watch my streams and hangs out on my Discord and stuff. Some like really wonderful people who support me a lot, especially like a bunch of them have become friends over the past couple of years too. It's really cool.
Well, Autumn Burchett, best of luck to you the rest of today in the tournament and throughout the whole league. You've got a bunch of people rooting for you, and you're an excellent player. Thanks for talking with me.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, welcome back to coverage here of MTG League Weekend. We're watching the MPL play here today. They of course played yesterday as well, but we focused on the rivals players today. It is all about the MPL as they try and get those match points through this entire season of 7 league weekends and champion split tournaments as well. The only ways they can earn points here to hopefully stay in the MPL and not get knocked out. Well, we've got another feature match coming up here from round number 10. Let's take a look at our players here. Li Shitian versus Andrew Cuneo. 8 wins for LST, 6 wins for Andrew Cuneo, who is having a bit of a rougher time in the tournament. He was near the bottom of the leaderboard last time we checked in on him, but he is playing a spicy deck. Is it Control versus Demir Rogues from Li Shitian? Let's take a peek at Demir Rogues from LST, a popular deck for a while now in the standard format. Bringing it this weekend, Eduardo, specifically against this Is It Control list from Cuneo. How do you like his chances?
Generally, if you have an aggro control deck, which Rogues is, and a control deck, the aggro control deck tends to have an edge because you get to dictate the pace of the game. You can kind of undermine their expensive cards very easily by just having 1-drop, 2-drop, and counter magic up. So generally, these are rough matchups for control decks, something like Rogue specifically, and you can see it as well in the sideboard. On top of that, you have Skyclave Shades that are perfect in a matchup like this. Just put a Fred at 1 or 2 mana, push ahead, and sometimes you resolve it into the story at end of turn. And that's even keeping up with the control deck's desire to have card advantage. You need less mana overall to operate, so I really like the Dimir Rogue's chances in this matchup for sure.
Okay, let's take a look at this. Is it control list, though? Unlike anything we've really seen so far today, at least from very many players. Ooh, Kiora, Best at Sea God? Yes, I'm here for that. Eduardo, break this list down for us.
That's the card you're excited about? Mine was Midnight Clock. I thought that was the card we were getting excited.
Yeah, that too. I mean, both of them.
Yeah, no. Kiora, Best of Sea God is kind of a cool win condition, but really Midnight Clock was a card I remember some players talking about it in Standard as an answer to Rogues, because eventually you can shuffle your graveyard back into your deck, cut off all their cards, reload to 7. And essentially in a combination like blue-red, you don't really have options to go faster on mana. So really we're seeing this deck being that combination of the adventure creatures plus instant speed, counter magic like negate and neutralize, kind of doing that tandem, right? You get to pass the turn and do things. It's just that generally this deck isn't very good at dealing with something that's already on the board, like a Bone Crusher Giant can be problematic for a deck like this if you don't have the Dragonfire on time. So in this matchup, really what we're going to have to see for Cuneo to take it down is something like a dealing with the board early and then getting a Midnight Clock to go off.
Awesome. Well, tick-tock, it's time for this match to start. Let's see if we can get the clock in action. Marshall Sutcliffe's here with the call.
I'm with Maria. Kiora, Best of Sea God. That's where I'm at. This looks really tough for Cuneo, does it not? These rogue decks tend to kind of run circles around control decks, generally speaking.
Right. The fact is, like, normally you would like to be able to operate on their turn, but the fact that their threats have flash is really not good for you.
Right. Cheap counter spells, flash threats, they could just play on your turn. It's a tough going here for Andrew Cuneo, sitting at the bottom of the rankings here as well. He's only got 6 wins over the course of the 3 days of play plus what we've done today, and really needs to get going and right the ship here.
Right. One card that I didn't talk about but is in Cuneo's hand and can be actually pretty relevant in this matchup is Shark Typhoon. The fact that it can't be countered, that it puts a relevant body against the Rogues player, is a way to have kind of this triple card actually, where it's threat, removal, and card advantage. Probably one of the best possible cards you could have in against the Rogues deck as a control deck.
Let's see what Lee's got going on here. Not a fantastic start to league play for Li Shitian either. 8 wins total. We're going to see Shark Typhoon cycled.
Right. Control deck wants to make sure that the land drops are insured. That's why Shark Typhoon has been a pretty good card in these control decks. And it's a card you see coming back time and time again just because of that ability to essentially be very good in the late game, early stages of the game, and just be such a versatile card.
Yeah, Li Shitian's going to take that open window there to resolve a Thieves Guild Enforcer. Soul Guide Lantern here for Cuneo. Going to get rowdy with the Shark first, though. And now what? Yeah, the Soul Guide Lantern. There it is.
Well, the goal is to draw a card.
Yeah, I hit a land here. Oh yeah, main deck Lantern, chat. You're seeing it right. Go ahead. Cuneo deciding to leave up Negate or Stomp or even Petty Theft Essence Scatter. Or even a Shark Typhoon. My goodness, all of the cards in hand for Cuneo outside of Storm's Wrath are usable here.
Right. Well, that's one advantage with this Izzet control deck is your cards are pretty cheap. You get to do 2 mana interaction spells at a lot of different points in the curve, and then they can scale up. Shark Typhoon scales up. Midnight Clock reloads your hand, and when you reload your hand, you'd love to do more cheap cards.
Once again, while the shields are down, Li Shitian is looking to take advantage, try to resolve something with just the 1 red mana available for Cuneo. This is on Li's end step, by the way. And it's going to be a Soaring Thought Thief.
It's one of the things with these flash frets is obviously you'd want to do them at the end of your opponent's turn, but the fact that you can
Cuneo's struggling to hit land drops of all things, something that he normally excels at. He's built a lot of his career on hitting land drops every turn. He knows how to do it, but his deck is not cooperating.
Plus that Soaring Thought Thief, there's not really an answer to it now. Storm's Wrath would have to resolve, and you need the land, you need to hope it resolves. There's a lot of conditions to that card that exist helping.
Okay, well, the desperation cycling here of the Shark Typhoon does find a land, thankfully, here for Andrew Cuneo. So he gets to keep that flowing. Li's just going to cycle away a Cling to Dust here. Nothing like seeing Maze Mind Tome and Midnight Clock right next to each other in hand there, Eduardo. It's the 2-drop, 3-drop dream for value players.
Look, they got milled too. They got milled too. You get extra copies of them in the deck.
Another non-land. We're going to see Maze Mind Tome.
Yeah.
And Andrew's taking a lot of medicine here, though. His library's starting to get milled away.
Maze Mind Tome was essentially an admission there of, look, I could go Midnight Clock plus a 2-drop. The problem is it's so easy for this Midnight Clock to get countered in this spot, and pretty much just will be, because it generates mana and can be a problem long term. So this way, Cuneo makes sure to have access to two mana spells.
Keeping up both Essence Scatter and Negate here. And if nothing were to happen, he could use the mana on the Maze Mind Tome to draw a card. Takes another hit here. What's the graveyard looking at? He's taking a look right now as well. It's getting there. Down to 15 life, so still fine on that department as well.
Right. However, now Li drew an Into the Story, and because that could get fired off at any point, I wonder if Li just fires it off here. The problem with firing it off right away is you essentially give a free turn to Andrew Cuneo, and Andrew Cuneo is struggling to essentially make plays, right? Because you have to keep mana up for anything the Rogues player could do and deal with the board state.
So he's going to kick off the festivities here with a stomp on the Thieves Guild Enforcer, leaving up just blue and red mana. But again, he can cast a bunch of different spells off of that at this point. Essence Scatter, Negate, Petty Theft. And one of the possible lines of play here, Eduardo, that we should keep an eye on, here didn't say please, is, given that Andrew's the control deck, you would think that decking could be a big part of the equation here, but that Midnight Clock does shuffle your hand and graveyard into your library, effectively undoing all of that mill. But Andrew has to get the board state to a place where he can have a Midnight Clock resolve and also have it on the battlefield for quite a long time. You get an hour counter on it every turn, and you can pay 3 mana to put another hour counter on it, but it doesn't trigger that whole shuffling everything together and drawing 7 until it gets to 12. Right at midnight is when it happens. That's 12 counters you need to get on. It takes a while to get rolling.
Right, and because Li Tian is playing 4 copies of Brazen Borrower, that is even harder. So
Oh, that's rough.
right, against most Rogues player, you might be able to get away with it, because they don't have a way to deal with it once it's in play. The lowest versions can't play a card like Brazen Borrower, um,
Hmm.
but yeah, here you can. So that is an issue. Yeah, puts the Storm's Wrath on the bottom. Wants to draw an untapped land, doesn't get it. The idea there was Storm's Wrath plus negate backup to deal with the board, but there's no need to do it right away.
Hmm.
You get the option to Storm's Wrath if there's a larger board a little down the line.
Andrew's still at 13 life, so not under immense pressure in that category either, though it does look like he's going to go ahead and go for the Storm's Wrath. You see no attacks by the Sharks first. In case this gets countered, he'd prefer to have those back as blockers, and the damage isn't particularly relevant. So heads up play there from Andrew. And it does, in fact, get countered. Temple of Epiphany sees, well, a Scorching Dragonfire. You'd think that Andrew would be interested in removal spells, but he's really just interested in keeping these land drops flowing at this point.
Right, more than enough action in hand, but
Right.
the problem is it's starting to be more and more counter magic, and Li Tian is going to start to convert those cards into board presence. So this counter magic from Kunio is going to have a much smaller value as time goes on.
Well, finally, Lee offered the trade 2 Sharks for 1 Thieves Guild Enforcer, and Andrew's all too happy to take that.
Kind of forced to, really.
Mm-hmm. Oh, no, another Midnight Clock. Not a card you necessarily want to see in multiples. Though
Might
they
not
at
be
least
so
do
bad.
create mana, so they're not dead.
Yeah. Technically, I think that was not that bad a draw by Kunio,
Yeah.
because you get to play this one. If it gets countered, you still get to either play the next one or keep counter magic up. So it lets you run out this card and potentially draw out a pretty important counter spell. I think Lido is so focused on making a gigantic shark. Oh, my bad. Sorry. I thought Lee would make a shark, but there was a Thieves Guild Enforcer on top, and that's just more reliable.
Okay, well, this one's not going to be reliable. Is this going to go straight to the graveyard off of Essence Scatter? Lee, with a couple of awkward Essence Scatters in hand himself, taking a look at Andrew Cunio's hand, you can see that those aren't going to find a home anytime soon.
Yeah, and Essence Scatter is much, much worse than Heartless Act in this matchup, because at least with Heartless Act, you can get rid of a shark token and keep putting on the pressure. So it's not great, but it's, conditionally it can be okay.
Yeah, I think that Cunio has Bone Crushers and Brazen Borrowers as his creatures. Is that accurate? I don't think he has more in the main.
Right, and apart from the Brazen Borrower, there's not much advantage to countering the creature.
Right. Okay, Midnight Clock number 2, tick-tock. So, Andrew now has Li Tian on the clock, as it were. Can this game plan actually work?
If Lee can't find more pressure, it definitely can. And Kunio has a bunch of counter magic, so the Soaring Thought Thief is going to have to do a lot of work.
So is Kunio incentivized to just keep putting counters on 1 clock? They're both going to be picking up counters on their natural turn cycle, but if he wants to dump mana into these, does he just try to get 1 to 12 as soon as possible?
Kind
of strategy
yes
to kind of spread them out.
I think against like a traditional rogues deck, yes, because they don't have Brazen Borrower. Because of the existence of Petty Theft, it kind of depends, right? If you have ways to protect your Midnight Clock, then you would dump it all into 1. But if you didn't have, I would probably spread it out a little bit.
Okay.
It depends so much on how much pressure you're facing, what you need to do, what you need to respect. That it's so contextually dependent on the game state rather than a definitive answer. think though with the negate and neutralize in hand, that's why we see Cuneo kind of go for one of these clocks over the other. Like went to kind of made a tall clock rather than spreading the clocks around.
He's approaching the halfway point. He's got a clock with 5 counters on it. So that makes it 5 p.m., right?
Depends on the time zone you live in, right? The other clock is somewhere else around the world.
Yeah, exactly. He's representing 2 time zones at this point. I like it.
That's what I want to do with pocket watches, is have a bunch on 24-hour time zones. That way you can.
Oh, that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
Would you pick one to represent like a city in that time zone or something?
Yeah.
You know, makes you think of that city, and then you can pick that up and know where it's at. I like it.
Yeah. While we wait for Lee's decision, we can talk about clocks. That's all that's in play.
Yes, Lee is taking his time with this one, so we can talk side projects. All right, looks like it's going to be Shark Typhoon, leaving up a couple of mana. So this is a 5/5.
Right. The idea was
this is petty theft. Yeah, not going to be a thing here, is it?
Yeah, Lee kind of made a 5/5 specifically, probably in the mindset of either having to countering probably a Dragonfire on the Soaring Thought Thief was the main thought process, which is why you don't see a counter on this petty theft.
What is he down to? The Drown in the Lock there? That's his option.
Yeah. Yeah, essentially you're down to just the one Drown in the Lock. And it is a very good counterspell, right? It literally is the card counterspell at this point. But it's the only one. Essence Scatter is pretty close to a blank piece of cardboard, except against specifically the Brazen Borrower in Cuneo's Adventure Zone. So we're probably going to see an Essence Scatter get fired here.
I think Lee's just been waiting for this moment the whole game. A target for one of these Essence Scatters has just been rotting in my hand. Hallelujah. Going to take down the Brazen Borrower and clear the way for this 2 damage. Down to 9 falls Andrew Cuneo. The clocks are ticking upwards, though. Now, here is Petty Theft, which is going to be met with Negate, and I'm curious to see if Lee wants to fight here. Yes, he does. So this is where he's going to deploy his Drown in the Lock to win this counter fight, as Andrew can't fight back here.
Yeah, this might be a pretty expensive counter fight, though, because now this is a good spot potentially for Cuneo to just try to land the Cura Best of Sea God. I mean, is that card really going to be better? Plus, you have Dragonfire. If things go badly, you just picked up. So if things go bad, you can just Dragonfire the Soaring Thought Thief, and you still have access to Essence Scatter. So, yeah, I had to pick up the counter fight on the Midnight Clock, but all of a sudden, this 7 mana saga.
I can't believe it. You know, I got to say, when I woke up this morning, Eduardo, I thought, me and Eduardo are going to be doing coverage. It's going to be sweet. I did not think I would see Cura Best of Sea God on the battlefield, but here we are, and I'm here for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's cracking a clock right now.
So now all of a sudden, there's an 8/8 hexproof Kraken on the battlefield, and this is going to change things.
These backup matches have been incredible. The last one we got to cover was Shoda Levy on those decks.
I know. And now we have Cura Best of Sea God on the battlefield, and Li Shitian is like, how am I supposed to get around this thing? Of course, one card that comes to mind is Thieves Guild Enforcer, right? The Death Touch ability on that could be really good at holding back this 8/8 and preventing any type of kind of race situation from forming here.
I was going to say, there's actually something even better that Thieves Guild Enforcer does apart from Death Touch.
What's that?
Winning the game.
Oh, yeah? Are we that close?
I mean, Cuneo has 13 cards, and Agathim's
Mm.
Awakening was a pretty important pickup for Li Shitian.
Oh.
I'm trying to remember if there's still. I know one got killed by a stomp earlier, but I wonder if it got escaped maybe to Clink to Dust or something, because I didn't see Lee fire off the Agathim's Awakening.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that could definitely be the case. Well, now second chapter on Kyurabessa's Sea God goes off, and in comes the 8/8 Kraken, rumbling, stumbling, bumbling. Boom! Take 8 down to 11 goes Lee.
People asking why we don't watch these backup matches all the. I mean, this is like the stars aligning, right? Like it doesn't always happen. But it's good to check in sometimes on how the clock's doing.
It is.
I mean, wait a second. Is this shark just lethal?
So the shark would be an 8/8.
Yeah, and your opponent.
So
7.
actually, it is just lethal. Oh, he didn't go for the full shark though. He went for a 6/6 and left 2 mana up.
That's kind of surprising to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure why he did.
Yeah, because the Soaring Thought Thief doesn't untap from the.
Cure.
I guess there was a worry of. I'm wondering actually, because there's no way to stop a petty theft on it. So I'm wondering what the idea was there.
Yeah, I don't know. But he does now get Cuneo down to 1 rather than 0.
And this Dragonfire is going to be really important. But there's another Shark Typhoon. That's going to matter.
Yeah, this is interesting because did you see Lee's reaction there?
Yeah, I think the thing is, look, it could be that essentially Lee forgot about the untapped part of Kyurabessa's Sea God, which, fair play because,
Oh.
you don't face that often.
Yeah, because it didn't make sense, right? The Heartless Act, keeping that up, you could just do on your turn and maintain lethal. And then the Essence Scatter wouldn't counter anything that you couldn't Heartless Act that you cared about, like a Brazen Borrower. If they had Petty Theft, well, you can't do anything about that anyway. Right. So maybe there's a card that we're missing, though. But for the most part, yeah, I think Lee recognized, oh, no, this doesn't leave me with lethal. I only get to get Andrew down to 1. And as we know, 1 is not 0.
1 is infinitely greater than 0, actually.
What, it is? Wow, I didn't know that.
Well, multiply anything by 0 and tell me how you get to 1.
Yeah, I'll get to working on that in between matches. But what if I come up with the answer? There's your real question. And now the shark gets to come over to the other side thanks to chapter 3. And it untaps it. Now it doesn't have haste. But what in the world happened this game?
Yeah, now let's see. The Midnight Clock also would stop Cuneo from losing to the decking. Kind of no matter what.
That's right. So I guess Lee just needs to make a bigger shark than the 6/6 and also find a blocker or an answer for the 8/8.
I mean, technically the shark could be a 1/1. I guess you want to make it at least a 4/4 to just not lose it to Stomp or Dragonfire.
Act, sure. Uh-huh.
Yeah. But yeah, this Heartless Act is that Neutralize essentially has that Heartless Act in its sights. So we're probably going to see a shark in a turn, and then Lee is going to figure out what the most additional efficient use of the mana is because, wow, 7/7 shark. Okay.
He's just going big time.
Oh, wow. And drew the second Shark Typhoon to get punished for that. Because if Lee had done literally a shark 1 smaller, you could have had a 1/1 shark.
Wow. There's the Heartless Act. And that's going to draw Neutralize from Cuneo.
Yeah, because this is an idea, right, that you could Agadeem's Awakening and have a way to block the 8/8 and win next turn. But Cuneo will reload with Midnight Clock. So, Drown in the Lock. There we go.
That looks like the business there for Li Shitian.
This was a game for sure.
This was a heck of a game. What a rip, though. Drown in the Lock. The removal spell needed here for Li Shitian, and all Andrew can do is look on. He was about like that was the turn, right? Like if Andrew could have survived that turn, he would have been able to fire off the clock, reload the hand, not have to worry about getting decked, and even won the game. And instead, Li Shitian finds exactly the removal spell he needs at exactly the right time. And he's going to get up and get a little jog in here because he doesn't like how those last few turns went. He recognizes that he made an error there and that he was trying to get the job done. Wow, that was quite a game. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll have more here from MTG League Weekend. Don't go anywhere. And welcome back. Game number one goes to Li Shitian in exciting fashion. A really sweet game between these two players, about as close as they get. If Andrew could have dodged that one last top deck there from Li Shitian, I think he would have been able to win that game. But as it stood, Lee found exactly what he needed to close out the game that turn, and we are underway in game number two. And it is the dream curve for me, Eduardo. Look at this. He just went Maze Mind Tome into Midnight Clock.
both players rocking the random artifacts combo.
Oh man, I am loving this.
This is amazing, by the way.
Incredible.
And look at this. That was actually kind of a interesting spot for Lee. There was the option to fire off a Thieves Guild Enforcer and Soaring Thought Thief, but instead went to drawing with Maze Mind Tome. Essentially prioritizing card advantage and ways to protect these threats.
All right, welcome back here to the booth. For just a second, it looks like the video was lagging just a little bit, so we're going to make a slight adjustment on our end, and we'll be right back into the game in just a second. Apologies for the delay there. But Eduardo, I can't lie. I can't get this smile off my face. He's curving like card draw artifact into card draw artifact with no regard for board state or getting your opponent dead or anything. Cuneo's kind of living the dream right now.
I know we've seen in standard planeswalkers take over for a while, and then now we had creatures, and now it's the artifact era. Clearly, we're back to where we belonged ever since Antiquities came out. No, but I mean, so that's actually one thing with small set standard. We kind of saw this, I think, with previous standard with Treasure Map, right? Treasure Map was dominant during a phase because it was a smaller set. You had less cards in standard, so you can use these cards that give you more time because the decks kind of are a little haphazard. There's maybe one or two threats missing that can really have them curve out as perfectly as they can. So you get more time to play with cards like Midnight Clock and Maze Mind Tome.
I'm here for it. Midnight Clock is ticking up quickly as well. Remember, it gets a counter on every upkeep, so it's tick, 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 and all of a sudden, the thing's ready to roll. In the meantime, Cuneo certainly has the tools to keep any creatures at bay. He's got double Brazen Borrower and a pair of Scorching Dragonfires. And it looks like he's just going to say, you know what? If this clock is going to tick up anyway, I'm just going to fire off a Brazen Borrower and start getting in with the thing.
Right.
It's also just a good blocker in the matchup.
Here's one thing, right? I mean, there is a way to kind of beat this clock is let it run out. Don't trade your cards for whatever, don't throw out your Soaring Thought Thieves against Scorching Dragonfires. And then the clock goes off. They shuffle their hand. And then you put all your stuff into play.
Mm-hmm.
As is, though, wasn't quite the game plan.
Here comes Scorching Dragonfire. Who's the Rogues player now, says Andrew Cuneo.
Lee not happy with that play.
The clock goes up to 6, and here comes the Brazen Borrower in for 3 damage. And now you can really see this game plan around the clock starting to form, because as Andrew slowly empties out his hand, not missing land drops this time, using his removal spells, putting his creatures on the battlefield, once that thing gets to midnight, well, he gets to reload with 7 fresh cards.
Yeah, Lee is desperately looking for a petty theft.
Reset the clock?
Yeah. I mean, that would do a lot of work.
Mm-hmm. Andrew finds Shark Typhoon plus Maze Mind Tome, so another couple of cards he can actually get on to the battlefield in some value way before the clock goes off. It's 9 o'clock now.
Yeah, and Cuneo's just 1 mana off the being able to trigger the clock at will.
And I got to say, Cuneo's doing a good job of applying pressure here as well, as Li Shiqian has really kind of morphed into the controlling deck here as well. Yet Cuneo's the one who's actually applying pressure to the life total.
Yeah, but this was a perfect, picking up both those petty thefts was amazing for Lee, because now you get to answer the shark and the clock in one turn. Otherwise, you'd have this horrible spot where you'd pretty much have to bounce the shark and let the clock go off.
Which I'm assuming would be unacceptable from Lee's perspective. Here comes Midnight Clock again. So the beginning of a new day. There's a Temple of Epiphany.
I think the clock would have been fine in that specific spot, just because there weren't a ton of cards in the graveyard and Lee wasn't trying to deal that type of pressure. But still, you'd rather it doesn't happen.
You mean it would have been fine for it to go off?
Yes.
Not you think
great,
he can beat the 7 cards?
Well, it would have been a bit less, right? Because Cuneo would have had to shuffle cards from hand, right? So at that point, it's just plus free cards, and you don't know what the cards are. It could just be a bunch of lands too.
Yeah. Skyclave Shade out of the sideboard here for Li Shiqian, a pesky threat that just keeps on coming in turn after turn. Scorching Dragonfire in hand, though, for Cuneo's nice.
Somebody's comparing Midnight Clock to Mox Sapphire Suspend 6 Time Twister. It's a very generous way to look at it.
It is generous, but also accurate. I like it. It's never happened in the history of Magic that way, but there is a theory.
Yeah, and Lee decided to go for it.
But the Scorching Dragonfire is going to take care of Thieves Guild Enforcer, leaving the Shade on board. Andrew has 20 life right now, not particularly worried. That was, of course, before the other Thieves Guild Enforcer hit. But now it's that and a Brazen Borrower. Boy, that would have been a real turn there with the double Thieves Guild Enforcer. So Andrew, smart to break up that party. As it stood, it's still a lot going on here for Lee now.
Right. Essentially, Lee kind of decided to deploy the cards once he was sure that Into the Story would get turned on. That was the key, right? Is you're doing this to get the 7 cards so you can fire off Into the Story. Beforehand, it didn't really have much value, which is why you didn't see it. Now that the frets are free twos and you can draw 4 cards, it's worth it.
So Shark's going to jump in front of Brazen Borrower. That's still 6 damage coming in. Down to 14 goes Cuneo. And he's leaning on these Maze Mind Tomes now. Ooh, but there's Into the Story in response here. 4 cards in the hand for Li Shitian. And more cards in the hand, though, from the tomes for Cuneo. And a second copy of Midnight Clock's going to hit. Remember, it does make mana as well, so he's get a little discount on that.
Oh, well, I hope it makes mana. Otherwise, I don't see the point of playing this card.
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people don't see the point of playing the card full stop.
Yeah. Well, no, it keeps on ticking. It never stops.
That's true. Also, they're just unimaginative. All right, Mystical Dispute is actually going to get some value even at this late stage of the game. As Lee's casting spells still on the end step. In this case, it was Brazen Borrower.
Right. But at least Andrew Cuneo is up 4 artifacts to 2.
That's true. The artifact fight is very much in Cuneo's side here. Another 6 damage, though, is going to drop Cuneo down to 8. And Li Shitian has been able to make a lot of progress on the life total of Andrew Cuneo over the last few turns.
Right.
And here comes the Maze Mind Tome.
To be fair, life totals are pretty safe for a little while just because of those Maze Mind Tomes.
Mm-hmm. 8 life basically sitting there locked up.
Yeah.
For Cuneo and for Li Shitian.
Right. I mean, this Brazen Borrower did a lot of work, but the problem is it's very difficult for Cuneo to, deal the last points of damage. So Lee was fine with just taking all his damage just because it didn't seem that relevant. There's a point where it does start becoming relevant.
Yeah, Graveyard is starting to get fairly large here for Cuneo as well. We see Li Shitian, though, flash in a Soaring Thought Thief to block. And we're going to see Shatterskull Smashing probably just wipe the board here. There we go.
Yeah, the auto tapping on Smashing is it's special sometimes.
That was backwards, yeah. But at any rate, plenty enough to get the 2-for-1 here for Cuneo. And he's sitting on Brazen Borrower, Neutralize, and a pair of lands. And another copy of Into the Story just basically demands to be neutralized. You just can't let that go. 4 extra cards in hand for Li Shitian would be a disaster. But look at this. A fight back from Li, who has negate to protect Into the Story and get those 4 cards into hand.
I think it's time for those clocks to go off. Cuneo essentially got to trade the cards, but is running low on resources. Mm-hmm. So I think it's time for the clock to strike midnight sooner rather than later.
Start maybe seeing some mana go into the one that's on 7 o'clock and try to race it up to 12 as quickly as possible. Oh, Seagate Restoration from Li Shitian. Look at that hand. Incredible. Now he does have to find a way to win here before the clock goes. Like, this is a situation where Lee could be the one who gets decked because he's drawn, 2 Into the Stories plus this.
So you know how Midnight Clock is not symmetrical, right? Your opponent doesn't draw the 7 cards. That's normally most people see that as as an advantage. However, the Illuminated see that as a drawback. Since now you can't shuffle Lee's hand away.
This game has been absurd. Now there's triple Midnight Clock on the battlefield for Cuneo versus a hand of 15, 18 cards for Li Shitian. Of course, his hand size restriction is gone as well, so he just gets to keep all of these.
Right. By the way, the clock is the real clock is starting to matter.
This
clock is at 6 minutes and 45 seconds. I mean, you're game up, but there is the opportunity to play game free, but Lee has to play this game very quickly now.
Yeah, and now we're in an interesting position where Cuneo is able to get that Midnight Clock up to 12. He can just respond even if Li Shitian were to take some action against it here, because it's at 10 o'clock and he's got 6 mana available.
Yeah, it's just...
And this is going to be negate on the Brazen Borrower, but really, Cuneo is just looking to empty out his hand because the clocks are about to tick here. This one's going to be at 11 o'clock, and he can sink some mana in. Oh, there's Neutralize as well.
I mean, that's getting shuffled in, I would suspect. It may not.
Looks like he's passing the turn. Cuneo says, I can wait. It's only 11
clearly
o'clock.
doesn't have enough cards, so activates Maze Mind Tome to draw another one.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so we're heading towards the upkeep here, and this Neutralize will protect Andrew from anything that could be done on end step. But here we go. Midnight Clock is triggering, and there it is. It just hit midnight, and boom, 7 new cards in hand with a whole bunch of lands on the battlefield. He even got the Neutralize back, though. Honestly, Scorching Dragonfire to protect his life total plus Neutralize, he's kind of on a razor's edge here.
Right. I mean, that's the thing, is
when your
Lee
opponent
was
has
really looking for that petty theft and could not find it.
But Skyclave Shade is going to get hit by Scorching Dragonfire, and then a new Skyclave Shade is also going to get hit by Scorching Dragonfire. And remember, that exile, so those aren't coming back anytime soon. Castle Vantress is going to start getting activated. And Cuneo, not interested in another copy of Neutralize. Though I do wonder how good, those are actually quite strong here, but he is in a position where he's overwhelmed by card advantage here, and cards like Shark Typhoon could be absolutely huge down the stretch.
Who's overwhelmed by card advantage in this game?
Somehow Cuneo's the one who's overwhelmed, even though he's the one who had the Maze Mind Tome and the Midnight Clock Dream open. What is even happening at this point?
So this was the reason, by the way, Neutralize got bottomed. Is Lee essentially has Shark Typhoon, right? And that's one of the best ways for Andrew Cuneo to lose the game. So needs an answer to Shark Typhoon.
Oh, there it is. Brazen Borrower right on the top of the library.
Yeah. Let's see here, though. How much mana is available? I guess Lee doesn't have access to that much mana, so Neutralize plus Dispute plus Negate should make sure that the Shark is gone away.
Yeah, Lee only has access to 2 mana here, so this should be easy for Andrew Cuneo to make sure that Petty Theft resolves and sends this Shark packing. There's only so many cards that matter here for Li Shitian. The good news is, having drawn effectively his entire library at this point, he does have 2 more copies of Shark Typhoon in hand, so he'll be able to continue to apply pressure in this way. Now, the interesting thing is it's getting late. It is 9 o'clock on one of those clocks again, and Andrew can just leverage the last draw 7 to get him to the next draw 7. And on top of it, I know this is confusing, but Li Shitian is also actually on the clock. As you mentioned before, his clock is down to 4 minutes and a half, and this is game 2. So if he loses this game, he would have a very, very tight game 3 to try to win.
I like this, though, trying to resolve the Shark Typhoon, because that's one of the few ways you can get to really leverage all the cards in your hand. Is there another counterspell in Lee's hand? There's a Dispute.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, Andrew just has to figure that Lee has all of it all the time with the number of cards in his hand. Seagate Restoration from Li Shitian is crushing Andrew Cuneo, and Andrew's jealous, right? You just know it. Oh, but there's a Brazen Borrower off the top. He can use that to at least reset the Shark Typhoon to try to find a way out here.
Right, because you get to shuffle back that graveyard, get back all that counter magic in your deck.
Yes. So presumably here, though, Lee's going to have a flurry of cards on end step to deploy. And here's the first one. Thieves Guild Enforcer. The mill from this, not really relevant as the clock is ready to go. And so here we go. Brazen Borrower. And now we could see a clock in response. No, it's just going to send it back to hand. So he's all good there. And Andrew can take his sweet time now. All these mill cards can come down. As long as they don't threaten Andrew's life total directly, he's okay with that. And these Thieves Guild Enforcers, yeah, temporarily they have the advantage as far as getting the pump, and now even pumped up further, but the Midnight Clock will reset that.
Yeah. So by the way, you don't see Cuneo here activating the Midnight Clock to draw into cards, because mana is going to be really critical with this many access to this many cards. So we're probably going to see Cuneo do it now, potentially after the attack, just because that's the best spot to get back the cards that are getting milled back into your library. That's going to make the Thieves Guild Enforcers just attack for 1 instead.
Yeah,
or two. Well, no, 1, right? Because the Soaring Thought is no longer good.
Right. Yeah, and we should mention here, it's kind of interesting as well. I wonder why he's playing that.
That is a good question. Soaring Thought didn't attack in, so.
Right.
Let's just focus on the clock.
Right. Which one? Lee's round clock or the midnight clock? I'll vote for midnight clock. Yeah, we should also mention here, Eduardo, the fact that, and by the way, my point, thank you so much, Andrew, is that his deck is a lot more spell dense than it was at the beginning of the game, right? All those lands on the battlefield are no longer in the deck, and now he just draws 7 spells. A little cheaty there with the smashing.
Andrew doesn't even play Fabled Passage very specifically to do this.
See, so each time this goes, it does get better and better for Cuneo. This has been one of the best games I've watched in a while. This is amazing.
This has been a hilarious game for sure.
Just an absurd game.
Look at this. Look at this. This is Lee's combat step. Look at the flurry of cards that are coming.
Unbelievable. Look at this. I mean, to Andrew's credit, he has whittled down Li Shiqian to almost only having his hand on screen now. Like, we can almost fit his hand back on screen. I wonder what it was at his peak. It was in the 19 to 20 range, I think. Now he's got him down to 10 or whatever.
Yeah. By the way, hi to our fans from Philly as well.
You're just absolutely chucking cards onto the battlefield at this point.
This has to be the highlight of the tournament.
Absolutely. And by the way, those enforcers, by the end of all that, still got in, and they got in for 5 each. Cuneo is now down to 2. Right. Is he overwhelmed, or can he fight back? He certainly has tools in hand here.
Yeah, but smashing is going to help a lot with the board state, but what might there's not enough time to fire off the second clock this turn. So going to have to deal with the board as best as possible.
Right. And it's interesting because at this point, with Li Shiqian crossing the 2-minute mark on his round timer, Cuneo has to feel like if he can win this game, the match is really, he's going to be in a really good place to win game 3, because it's going to be so difficult for Lee to win a game in a minute or whatever.
Yeah, it's just
can he survive?
That's free lethal threats.
Okay.
4 rather with the shark coming in.
So the Scorching Dragonfire would take care of 1, and then the Shark Typhoon to block would be another.
Yeah, but Lee has access to Petty Theft in hand.
Yes, he does.
And I don't think Cuneo's Maze Mind Tome at free counters, though? Oh, so Cuneo
It is. Great call, Eduardo. That means it's 4 extra life effectively in the bin whenever Andrew wants it. And this is... Andrew has played the clock beautifully, and I mean that in both senses. He is at 11.5 minutes, where Lee is at 1.5 minutes, and Andrew, of course, has fired off 2 midnight clocks, getting to midnight and reloading his hand and keeping himself from being decked. Incredible stuff.
Right, let's see here. You have, so into the story first, you have Drown in the Loch and Brazen Bar and Petty Theft to deal with the shark. So currently, this would be 3 attackers and 1 blocker.
Which is not lethal. It would be 5 damage if the Brazen Borrower gets blocked, and then 4 extra life in the bin from the Maze Mind Tome. Wow. This is about as close as they get in a game that is in turn whatever.
Wait. No. Wow. Okay, this is what Lee's doing. Okay, I was wondering if Lee was going to Petty Theft the Maze Mind Tome, if that works. I don't know if it does. Just because it has
did it now. The trigger's on the stack, so no.
But it says if you do, I'm not 100% sure. It doesn't matter. Let's see how this game ends, because we're down to the last 20 seconds for Lee.
Right. So this is it. He has to win this turn realistically, or this thing's over. And he does not have a lethal attack. There's a block from Cuneo. He goes to 1. And I don't think Lee can do it. He only has 5 seconds left on his clock. Cuneo even has a Shark Typhoon. And Andrew Cuneo finds his way to victory through midnight clock and his opponent's clock.